When I gave birth alone, my family disowned me. Look, your sister, a husband, a perfect family, my mother said. My father sighed. Having a child without a husband, you've brought shame on us. My sister sneered. You couldn't even get married. How will you raise a child? They threw me out with nothing. Still, I held my son tightly. But when his father appeared unexpectedly, my family froze. Olivia Harrison took a deep breath as the morning sunlight streamed through her window. Maplewood, the small Pennsylvania town where she lived, was filled with people who valued tradition and appearances. Having grown up in such a town, she had always lived her life mindful of others' opinions. Olivia, you're going to be late for the church meeting today. Her mother Judith's voice echoed from downstairs. As the president of St. Joseph's Church Women's Association, Judith was a respected figure in the community. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and impeccable clothing reflected her way of life. I'm getting dressed now, Olivia replied as she fixed her hair in front of the mirror. When she went downstairs, her father Thomas was sipping coffee while reading the newspaper. Good morning, Papa. Thomas was a man who had worked at the local bank for 40 years, rising to branch manager before retiring last year. His graying hair and the sharp eyes behind his glasses told of his strict nature. Good morning, he replied briefly, returning to his newspaper. Ashley called, her mother said. Martin was promoted to partner yesterday. Isn't that wonderful news? Olivia's sister Ashley was her parents' pride and joy. She had married a successful lawyer, lived in a nice suburban home, and was celebrated as a model for young couples at church. Yes, that's great. Olivia smiled. But behind that smile swirled complicated emotions. You need to find someone nice soon, her mother said. Janet's daughter is already pregnant with her second child, you know. Olivia nodded silently. These conversations were a regular occurrence. On Monday, Olivia returned to her usual work at the Maplewood Art Museum. As an art restoration specialist, she worked to bring old paintings and crafts back to life. She truly loved this job that breathed new life into aged artworks that most people would overlook. Olivia, how are the preparations for the new exhibition coming along? Director Jessica popped into her workspace. I'll be done with 2 more pieces. The 18th century miniature portrait is giving me a bit of trouble. I'm counting on you. Next week's Art of Los Eros exhibition is an important event. Olivia nodded and picked up her delicate brush again. As she continued working with concentration, she sensed someone entering the room. Excuse me, is this the art restoration room? Olivia turned toward the deep, calm male voice and saw a man standing there in modest jeans and a navy sweater. His brown hair was slightly long, and he wore intellectual-looking glasses. Yes, it is, Olivia answered. But tours are only on public days. I'm sorry. I actually got special permission. The man smiled. My name is Miles Foster. I'm interested in antique art, and asked Jessica if I could observe the restoration process. Olivia was a bit perplexed but nodded when she saw the sincerity in his eyes. All right. I'm currently restoring an 18th century miniature portrait. Rococo style, isn't it? Miles approached her workbench and quietly remarked. Known for its delicate brushwork. Olivia was surprised. You know art history. Just as a hobby. He smiled modestly. I'm particularly interested in portraits from the 17th to 19th centuries. The two then talked extensively about art history and restoration techniques as she showed him her work. Miles's clothing was modest, but his words revealed deep cultural knowledge. Would you like to come to the exhibition opening? Olivia asked boldly as they were parting. I'd love to hear your professional opinion, Miles smiled gently. I'd be delighted. On the night of the exhibition opening, Miles appeared as promised. He enthusiastically praised Olivia's work, and after leaving the museum, they continued talking at a nearby cafe. Miles said he was from Boston and currently worked in historical research. Olivia gradually found herself drawn to his sincerity and kindness. Over the next few weeks, they began to see each other frequently. Time with Miles helped Olivia forget the pressure from her family. He always listened to her earnestly and never judged her. Your work is wonderful, Olivia, he said one evening, breathing new life into lost things. It's like magic. She smiled. You really listen to me? My family? She trailed off. What about your family? Miles gently asked. My family doesn't understand my work. Especially my mother. who only thinks it's time for me to get married and have a family. Miles took her hand. You have a remarkable talent. You should cherish it. However, as their relationship was deepening, Olivia received a sudden call from Miles. Olivia, I have to leave town for a while. His voice was heavy. Family matters. I'm sorry it's so sudden. For how long? Olivia felt anxious. I don't know. I'll come back as soon as I can. I promise. After that, contact with Miles ceased. His cell phone was no longer in use, and when she visited the address he had given her, someone else was living there. Olivia was confused and hurt. The man she had believed in had vanished like an illusion. A few weeks later, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Looking at the trembling pregnancy test in her palm, she cried. Despite searching for Miles repeatedly, she couldn't find any trace of him. After much anguish, Olivia made a decision. She would have and raised the child on her own. With this resolve in her heart, she headed to her parents' home to tell them the truth. Pregnant? The color drained from her mother Judith's face. Thomas, did you hear what your daughter just said? Her father Thomas's face reddened with anger. Who is the father? A man named Miles, Olivia answered with a trembling voice. But I've lost contact with him. I can't believe it, her mother gasped. You've been abandoned. No, Olivia desperately denied. He was a sincere person. I think something happened to him. Something happened? Her father laughed through his nose. I've heard enough excuses from men. That night's family meeting was a nightmare for Olivia. You can't raise a child alone, her mother said coldly. Either abort it or give it up for adoption, her father declared. Olivia answered with a trembling voice. I'm going to have this baby. I'll raise it even if I'm alone. Her father's eyes burned with anger. Then go your own way. But be prepared to become the family's disgrace. Thus, Olivia's battle began. On a Sunday afternoon with winter sunshine streaming through the window, Olivia sat on the sofa in her parents' living room, holding her 2-week-old son Noah in her arms. A cold atmosphere pervaded the room, and it wasn't because the fireplace wasn't burning properly. I thought you would reconsider, Judith said, straightening her back and crossing her thin arms in front of her chest. Her eyes were looking out the window, not at the tiny baby sleeping in Olivia's arms, as if refusing to even acknowledge her first grandchild. Reconsider what? Olivia answered quietly but firmly. Noah is my child. I don't regret my choice to have him. A child without marriage. Judith swallowed her words and shook her head. What am I supposed to tell everyone at church? What about our family's reputation? From the corner of the living room, Thomas sighed. He pretended to read the newspaper, but his rigid expression betrayed his anger. Isn't there something more important than reputation? Olivia said. The baby moved slightly, and she gently stroked his tiny head. Noah is innocent. He's done nothing wrong. Look at your sister. Judith's words cut sharply into Olivia's heart. Ashley has a wonderful husband and a perfect home. She's living the life we expected. Why did you? Having a child without marriage, you've disgraced our family. Thomas suddenly put aside his newspaper and declared. His voice was low and heavy, but it seemed to echo throughout the room. We've lived as a respected family in this town for decades. The Harrison name has been a symbol of trust and dignity, and now because of you? The front door opened, and someone came in with a cold breeze. It was Ashley. Her perfectly styled blonde hair, elegant coat, and the way she held her husband Martin's arm made her look like she had stepped out of a magazine cover. Sorry I'm late, Ashley said with a smile, but that smile vanished when it turned to Olivia. Oh, you brought the baby? Martin sat on the sofa somewhat uncomfortably and spoke little. He seemed to be trying not to get involved in this family issue. Yes, of course, Olivia replied. Noah is still small, so I can't leave him. Ashley laughed through her nose. You couldn't get married, but you think you can raise a child? Those words struck Olivia's heart. Tears welled in her eyes at the merciless words from her once close sister. But Olivia looked down, trying not to show her tears. That's enough, Ashley, Judith said. But it wasn't to protect her daughter. She just wanted to avoid the argument from escalating. Why did you call me here? Olivia quietly asked. Just to criticize me? Silence filled the room. Thomas stood by the window, staring at the scenery outside. Judith clutched her coffee cup, and Ashley sat next to Martin, elegantly crossing her legs. "We've made a decision," Thomas finally said. "You have no place in this house. You brought this on yourself," Thomas said without turning around. "There is no place for someone who has shamed the family." Olivia looked at her mother for help. But Judith remained silent, merely following her husband's decision. "We want you to leave now," Thomas continued. "Just take what you need." In Olivia's arms, Noah began to make small noises. She gently rocked her son with trembling hands and stood up. Fighting back tears, she headed to her room on the second floor. 30 minutes later, Olivia came down the stairs with a bag packed with minimal belongings and baby supplies. Noah was held against her chest, moving his tiny hands. No one was in the living room. Everyone had avoided the scene of their farewell. As she put on her shoes at the entrance, she didn't look back. She pushed all 32 years of memories in this house deep into her heart and opened the door. It had begun to snow outside. The cold wind struck Olivia's cheeks, but she tucked Noah into her coat to protect him. "It's okay, Noah," she whispered quietly. "We have our own path." She began walking on the snowy road. There was anxiety and fear, but also a strange sense of liberation. She held Noah tightly. No one could separate them. "Everything I need is right here," Olivia vowed as she gazed at her son's tiny face. "You and me, we're going to grow stronger together." The snow continued to fall silently, gradually erasing their footprints. 8 months later, Olivia's life had completely changed. The wound of being disowned by her family was deep, but she was determined to be strong for her son. With the help of Jessica, the museum director, she was able to continue her art restoration work from home. She had converted a corner of her small apartment's living room into a workspace and worked with concentration during Noah's nap times. Upon arriving at the museum, the receptionist Sarah waved. "Jessica's been looking for you. She has something important to discuss." "Thanks," Olivia replied while pushing the stroller. The museum staff always cheerfully greeted Noah whenever they saw him. When she lost her family, the museum staff had become her new family. When she knocked on Jessica's office door, she heard a "come in" from inside. "Ah, perfect timing." Jessica stood up to greet her. With cute Noah too. She gently stroked Noah's cheek and motioned for Olivia to sit down. "I have wonderful news," Jessica said excitedly. "Foster International has requested a very important restoration." "Foster International?" Olivia tilted her head. "The big corporation?" "Yes. They have a collection of 17th-century Dutch paintings and want one of their masterpieces restored." Jessica pulled out some documents. "The compensation is exceptional. I recommended you because I know you'll do an outstanding job." Olivia gasped. "Really? You're trusting me with such a significant project?" "I have no reason to doubt your talent," Jessica smiled. "And with this compensation you could move to a larger apartment, couldn't you?" Olivia felt her heart fill with gratitude. "Thank you, Jessica. I'll do my very best." "Wonderful. Their representative will be here tomorrow for a meeting," Jessica said. "Dress formally." That night, after putting Noah to bed, Olivia pulled out a dress from the back of her closet that she hadn't worn in a long time. It was one of the few good clothes she had brought when she left home. As she ironed it, she felt nervous yet excited. The next day, Olivia headed to the museum's conference room. Linda, Jessica's secretary, was taking care of Noah. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. At the far side of the large table in the center of the room, a tall man was standing by the window. The light from the window obscured his face, but there was something familiar about his stance. When the man turned around, Olivia felt as if her feet were nailed to the floor. "Miles?" Her voice was barely a whisper. The man standing before her was indeed Miles Foster. However, his appearance was completely different from his previous modest self. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with confident bearing, he seemed like a different person. "Olivia." His voice was quiet, but seemed to resonate throughout the room. "Mr. Foster, you already knew her?" Jessica asked in surprise. "Mr. Foster?" Olivia was confused. "I'm late with introductions," Jessica said. "This is Mr. Miles Foster, secretary to the CEO of Foster International." However, the way the staff treated Miles didn't seem like they were addressing a mere secretary. They showed exceptional respect and listened carefully to his every word. Olivia's head was spinning. Was the man standing before her the same person who had suddenly disappeared 8 months ago? And was he really just a secretary? The meeting proceeded formally, but Olivia's mind was filled with questions for Miles. She couldn't meet his eyes, and he too seemed to be avoiding direct eye contact with her. "Now, why don't you two work out the contract details?" Jessica said as she left the room with the other staff. A sudden silence enveloped them. "Olivia, please let me explain," Miles said quietly. 8 months, Olivia's voice trembled. 8 months ago, you disappeared. Without any contact. I tried to find you." Miles took a step closer. "I lost your contact information. I've been right here," Olivia said. "Where were you? And, what is all this?" She pointed at his expensive suit. "Who are you really?" Miles took a deep breath and motioned for Olivia to sit down. "It's time for the truth," he said. "I am indeed Miles Foster. But I'm not a secretary, as Jessica said. Foster International's heir," he stated definitively. "Born to succeed my father's company?" Olivia was too shocked to speak. Foster International was a global company, with assets said to be in the billions. "I was looking for someone who would see the real me," Miles continued. "Someone who would accept just a Miles, not my name, position, or wealth. That's why I was living with my identity concealed. And then, you met me. When I met you, for the first time I could forget who I was." His eyes were sincere. "But my father suddenly fell ill, and I had to return home urgently. After that, I was traveling around the world dealing with a company crisis. Why didn't you contact me?" Tears fell from Olivia's eyes. "I lost your contact information. I had to change my cell phone. When I returned to Maplewood, I was told you had left the museum." As their conversation continued, suddenly the sound of a baby crying came from the hallway. "I'm sorry, Olivia." Linda hastily opened the door. "Noah's been looking for his mama." In her arms, Noah was reaching out his tiny hands, seeking Olivia. Miles stood frozen. His eyes moved from Olivia to the baby, and back to Olivia again. "A child," his voice trembled. Olivia took Noah from Linda and held him to her chest. "My son, Noah." The color drained from Miles's face. "When after you left, I found out I was pregnant," Olivia said quietly. Miles took one step closer, then another. His eyes were fixed on Noah's small face, recognizing his own features in it. "My son?" Olivia nodded slightly. "Yes, your son, Miles." Miles touched Noah's small cheek with a trembling hand. The baby was a bit startled by the touch of a stranger, but soon calmed down and stared back at Miles with large eyes. The moment their eyes met, the atmosphere in the room changed. "He is my child." Miles's voice trembled with emotion. "Yes," Olivia answered quietly. Tears welled in Miles's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried to," Olivia said sadly. "But I couldn't find you." Miles put his hand to his mouth and took a deep breath. "Olivia, I'm truly sorry. If I had known." "Miles, I don't blame you," Olivia said while holding her son. "You didn't know." But Miles looked straight into her eyes. "Now I know. And I want to take responsibility." At those words, Olivia was hit with complex emotions. Could she trust Miles? Would he disappear again? However, she felt the same sincerity in the eyes of the man standing before her as she had before. "Noah is very healthy," Olivia said, as if changing the subject. "The doctor is satisfied with his growth." "I want to know everything about him," Miles said earnestly. "Everything from the day he was born until now." They moved to the museum's small cafe, and Olivia told Miles about Noah's growth one by one. His first smile, his first rollover, and the babbling he had recently started. Miles listened with a serious expression, not wanting to miss a single word. However, when the conversation turned to family matters, Olivia was evasive. "Did something happen?" Miles sensed this and asked. Olivia took a deep breath and told him about the break with her family. How she had been thrown out of the house and that she had cut off contact since then. Miles's expression hardened. "They did that to you?" Olivia was surprised by the anger in his voice. "So, you've been alone?" "I'm not alone." Olivia smiled. "I have Noah." Miles took her hand. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here." Over the next few weeks, Miles gradually became part of Olivia and Noah's life. He visited them almost daily, sometimes cooking dinner and helping with Noah's bath time. His work was busy, but he always made time to be with Noah. He's becoming attached to you, Olivia said one evening, watching Miles soothe Noah. He's a wonderful child, Miles replied proudly. Strong and curious, just like you. Olivia smiled, but anxiety remained in her heart. What would become of their relationship? Miles led a life traveling the world as a businessman. How would she and Noah adapt to that life? One day, Miles brought a small box to her apartment. Olivia, there's something I want to tell you. He sat on the sofa looking nervous. I don't think we can start over, because Olivia's heart sank. There's no need to start over, Miles continued. My feelings haven't changed. From the moment I met you, I've loved you. He opened the small box and took out a beautiful emerald ring. I want you to be with me, to become a family with Noah and me. Olivia gasped. Miles, isn't this too fast? We still don't know each other, I know, he said. We can take our time. I just wanted to express my feelings. He placed the ring in her palm. Please, think about it. Olivia was confused. She had deep feelings for Miles as well, but everything seemed to be moving so quickly, and she felt hesitant. However, as she experienced Miles's sincerity and kindness every day, her heart gradually opened. He always kept his promises, and his love for Noah only grew deeper. Olivia, Miles said with a serious expression one day, I've been thinking about your family. Olivia's face clouded. They're not my family anymore. They're still your parents, Miles said quietly. And Noah's grandparents. They threw us out. Olivia's voice was hard. I know. Miles took her hand. That's why I think it's time to show them the truth. What do you mean? Let's visit your family home on Thanksgiving, Miles said. The three of us. Olivia looked at him in surprise. You're joking, right? I'm serious. Miles's eyes were filled with determination. I want to show them how strong you've become. What a wonderful mother you are. And he smiled slightly. How foolish their prejudice was. Olivia was silent for a long time, but finally nodded slightly. All right, but I'm scared. It's going to be okay, Miles embraced her. This time, I won't leave you alone. On Thanksgiving Day, Olivia adjusted her hair in front of the mirror several times. She was dressed formally for the first time in a long while, wearing a simple but elegant dress that Miles had given her. Noah was also dressed in a small suit, looking a bit unhappy about his first formal attire. Ready? Miles opened the door. He was wearing a perfectly styled suit, radiating the dignity of a successful businessman. Olivia took a deep breath. I'm ready. The three of them got into Miles's luxurious car and headed to the quiet residential area of Maplewood, where Olivia's family home was located. The scenery visible from the car window was familiar yet evoked painful memories. There, Olivia said softly. Miles parked the car in front of her family home. The house hadn't changed. The well-maintained garden, the polished doorknob, everything was as she remembered. Let's go. Miles held her hand. Olivia held Noah and slowly approached the entrance. Before she could ring the bell, the door opened. Her mother Judith was standing there. Olivia. Judith's eyes widened in surprise, and she was speechless at the sight of her daughter and the man standing next to her. Furthermore, when she noticed the luxury of the car, her expression completely changed. Hello, Mom, Olivia said quietly. May we come in? Miles asked politely. Judith hurriedly invited them in. In the living room sat her father Thomas and sister Ashley, who also looked surprised to see Olivia and her companions. Forgive my late introduction, Miles said, in a calm voice. I'm Miles Foster, CEO of Foster International. 1 year later, in winter, Olivia stood in front of a large window where snow was falling, quietly gazing at the scenery outside. Snow had accumulated in the vast garden which was decorated for Christmas. A little distance away, Noah was making a snowman with Miles. Noah was now 1.5 years old. He could stand firmly and had recently begun to speak small words. Mama. Noah waved at her. Miles also looked up and smiled at her. Olivia gently placed her hand on her stomach. She was carrying their second child. According to the doctor, it would likely be a girl. What are you thinking about? Miles approached from behind and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. About this past year, Olivia took his hand. Everything has changed so quickly. Miles and Olivia had married 6 months ago. It was a ceremony in a small church, But as the son of the foster family was getting married, the local papers gave it substantial coverage. Despite Olivia's resistance, her background as the daughter of a prominent family in Maplewood also drew attention. Olivia now had her own art restoration workshop. Though established with Miles's support, she had achieved success through her own talent and effort. Her skills were highly regarded in the industry, and important works were continuously being delivered to her. "There's been another contact from your family," Miles said quietly. Olivia's expression clouded slightly. Her relationship with her family home remained complicated. On that Thanksgiving day, when her family learned Miles's true identity, their attitude completely changed. Especially her mother Judith, who suddenly began to show interest in Olivia and the baby. Her father Thomas also showed pride in the connection to the foster family. That hurt her. What they wanted wasn't her, but the connection to Miles. "They want to invite us to Christmas dinner," Miles continued. Olivia sighed softly. "Will Ashley be there too?" Her relationship with her sister remained cold. Ashley's perfect marriage was cracking. Rumors said she was now separated from her husband Martin due to his infidelity. "She'll probably be there," Miles said. "Alone," Olivia thought, as she gazed at the snowy landscape through the window. She didn't hate her family. She just couldn't forget how they had hurt her. But now, she had a new family. Miles and Noah, and the baby who would soon be born. She had become stronger. "Let's invite them," Olivia decided. "We'll have dinner here." Miles looked at her with surprise. "Really?" "Yes," Olivia smiled. "Noah has the right to know his grandparents." And she paused briefly before continuing. "Maybe they deserve a chance to change." A few days later, on Christmas Eve, warm lights illuminated Olivia and Miles's luxurious home. The doorbell rang, and Olivia took a deep breath before opening the door. There stood her parents and sister. "Merry Christmas," she said quietly. When they sat down at the dinner table, Miles stood up with a glass in hand. With everyone's eyes on him, he smiled at Olivia. "Olivia is the most wonderful woman I've ever met in my life," Miles said with emotion in his voice. "Her value lies not in my wealth or status, but in her own strength and love. I cherish what you overlooked." The table fell silent. Tears welled in Judith's eyes, and Thomas lowered his gaze. Ashley maintained a rigid expression, fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. Olivia regarded them with a peaceful heart. She was no longer hurt. She had a loving family and her own life. Most importantly, she knew her own strength.